Science is never standing still. The Met Office has a team of scientists dedicated to helping industry and their changing needs.
We see our role at the Met Office as mitigating the impacts of weather to commerce and industry as they go about their day-to-day activities, and to reduce the surprises that can occur when the weather throws something at us that isn't entirely expected. It's the role of the Met Office to really identify those situations and to look back over past records and see when situations have occurred in the past, so that when we are planning new construction activity, we don't get caught out by weather that really we should have anticipated. This saves money over the life of the construction project as resources are used to their full potential, and above all, it reduces danger to life such that people are not working on a construction site in conditions that are inappropriate. So at the planning stage of a project, it is very helpful to understand what sort of weather might be expected at this particular location at different times of year, such that the activities that are most weather sensitive can be planned to occur in those windows where there is most likely to be the right weather conditions. So in planning services, we need to make the most of good weather, and we need to mitigate the impacts of bad weather. In particular, this applies to spring and autumn, in these transition months between summer and winter, where we can get very summery weather or very wintry weather, and it is in these transition periods that we can make the most of having good weather insight and knowledge to ensure that all the resources on a building site are being used correctly at these times of year. And I'll now show you a few services that we offer to help do that planning process. The first service that I am showing here is a frequency analysis of temperature for February for Heathrow. A frequency analysis of critical conditions by time of year and time of day is a key tool for both strategically planning the project and for tactical planning as the project progresses. This example shows a frequency analysis in terms of percentages by hour of day and by temperature. The hour of the day is along the top and the temperature is down the side, and so the temperatures run from -8 all the way up to +17, but with that crucial dividing line between temperatures above zero and temperatures below zero, and that is shown in the bottom line. And so, for instance, at midnight in February, 7.5% of the time the temperature is below freezing. And then, of course, as one goes through the night, that probability increases into the early hours around dawn, and then during the daytime and early afternoon, there are still a few occasions when, even at Heathrow, the temperature doesn't rise above freezing. As a second example, this table shows the days, mainly in winter, when the soil is likely to be too wet for unhindered trafficability, especially for equipment without low ground pressure tyres or tracks. This soil moisture deficit data is calculated daily by the Met Office, as it has been done for nearly 40 years now, all the way back to 1980. The table that you can see shows the last 9 years of data, looking at the days when the soil was too wet to take most tracked vehicles over the year from January to December. You can see that most of the days when trafficability is not possible are in the middle of winter, but if one takes, for example, the winter from 2011 to 2012, there were actually no days at all when trafficability wasn't possible. This was a dry winter. But then at the end of 2012, we went into wintry conditions very, very quickly, having had a very poor summer. So the ground was already very wet, And so right from November onwards, we were experiencing days when the ground really was too wet for most machinery to be worked upon it. And so you can see that information there going through the years all the way up to 2018. And it is this information that we can use to advise and help plan when certain activities, especially during the winter months, can be carried out. So these are just two examples of the ways in which we can transform raw weather data into services that enable the planning process to really take into account the impact on operations and activities in terms that you, the construction industry, fully understand. And so it is this transformation process that we're very eager to take forward and to work with and develop such that the weather is fully taken into account as a construction project is planned. So having now considered the planning of a project, let's move into the operational phase of the project, when the building and construction is actually taking place. This is where weather forecasts really come into their own, and we can forecast the weather with high accuracy out to about 2 weeks ahead, as things currently stand. And so it is pulling these forecasts through again in a way that has been interpreted and transformed such that you, the construction industry, can actually consume these forecasts that we are very intent on doing. So the critical thing here is looking at thresholds. Many construction activities cannot be undertaken when the weather is too windy, too wet, too cold. So what we can do is actually predict the probability of whether a particular threshold over the coming 2 weeks is going to be exceeded or not. And so what we get here is weather windows, where we can see the opportunities over the coming weeks when a weather critical activity can be undertaken with safety, or whether it would be a more chancy operation to undertake, but sometimes very necessary, and so therefore other mitigating actions may need to be taken if something really important has to be done that could be impacted by adverse weather conditions. Modern techniques that we use in our forecasting process now mean that we can predict the probability of a particular threshold being exceeded, rather than just predicting whether the temperature is going to be 1 degree, 0 or -1. So this really helps to actually build probability and risk into the operational day-to-day planning on a building site. So here is an example of what a concrete pouring forecast can look like. It is, for instance, here issued at 6 a.m. on Monday the 7th of January and extends out to the 16th of January. And the numbers in the table show the percentage probability of the temperature staying above 0 degrees C during the concrete pouring and setting time. What we've done here is looked at two different parts of the day. We've taken an early morning period up to 11 a.m. and then we've taken an afternoon period between 11 and 4 p.m. such that it can be determined whether the early morning or the later afternoon would be a better time to pour concrete. And then in addition to that, we've made a differentiation between concrete setting at a standard rate or fast setting concrete, and the impact that using fast setting concrete might have. And so that you can see over the first 3 days, it looks as if concrete pouring and setting conditions are going to be quite good. But then we go into a period where on the 10th and 11th of January, the weather conditions are much more adverse, except possibly for pouring fast setting concrete in the morning period. We then go into another period of comparatively good conditions, although with some uncertainty, especially if pouring concrete in the afternoon. And then finally, for the last 2 days, where the weather forecasts become that little bit more uncertain, we're getting closer to this 50-50 probability, but still giving some indication. For instance, that right at the end of the period, pouring standard concrete in the afternoon on the 15th and 16th January is probably not something to plan for. Not all construction takes place at ground level. With high-rise buildings and so many other different bridges and so on being constructed at high level, it is very important to understand what the weather is doing well above ground level. And in particular, this is where wind is very important. The wind increases with height in various ways during different weather conditions, and so it is important to not make sweeping assumptions about how the wind is going to alter with height. The Met Office, via its forecasts and via the windroses that we produce, are able to help you understand what the wind is doing actually at the height where some critical operation is taking place and where cranes may not be able to operate in all wind conditions. And not only that, temperature varies with height as well, and so some activities that may not be appropriate to do at ground level because of temperature problems may still be possible to do at height, or vice versa, again depending on the weather conditions prevailing at the time. And Met Office forecasts and analyses are there to provide that insight and information. Information like this cannot be gleaned from general weather forecasts. It is worth noting that even weather warnings give only a general level of threat for a broad region and cannot address the specific impact on a particular building site in the way that a bespoke forecast can, and certainly not at higher levels. So having now considered the long-term and the short-term planning within a project, the Met Office can also provide services that enable us to monitor the project as it progresses. Downtime summaries are specifically designed to supply the information needed to support contract extensions due to inclement weather. They place the recent weather into the longer-term context with specific reference to a 1 in 10-year event. This need particularly applies to rain, frost and snow. A more detailed analysis can also be undertaken on request if the return period of a very specific event that may only have occurred once in 25 years or even perhaps once in 100 years needs to be investigated. While summer conditions are far more helpful to the construction industry than winter conditions, we still mustn't overlook the fact that in the summer we do get very intense rainfalls from time to time, and they can be very localised as well. And not only do the intense rainfalls cause disruption and difficulty, but they're often accompanied by lightning. And so these have safety impacts, and what we can do for the construction industry is provide information on the likelihood of lightning occurring on a particular building site, and then during the forecast period actually predict the probability of lightning occurring. And that is especially important, of course, when people are working at height on the tops of cranes and high buildings.
The Met Office can offer tailored services throughout the construction project lifecycle to ensure that losses of all types are minimised, and full use is made of the opportunities that the fickle but predictable British weather throws at us. We work with customers to understand their thresholds and provide services to inform go or no-go decisions. We can use our science expertise and weather data to create bespoke services and have created some wonderful insights.